The Natural Resource Charter is a global initiative. It outlines a set of principles intended for use by governments, societies, and the international community to determine how best to manage natural resource wealth for the benefit of current and future generations. The charter document was initially written by a group of leading experts on natural resource governance, including Paul Collier, Michael Spence, Robert Conrad, and Anthony Venables, amongst other senior economists, lawyers, and political scientists. It received input from a range of stakeholders during a 12-month public consultation prior to the launch of the Charter in 2010. In 2011, the Charter was adopted by the African Union Heads of State Steering Committee for the new Partnership for Africa's Development as a flagship natural resource governance program in 2012. Natural resources abound in Nigeria, and they include diverse plant and animal biodiversity, arable land and fertile soils, petroleum, natural gas, and coal. Other resources include hydropower and abundant solid minerals, with examples being iron ore, gold, tin, columbite, limestone, lead, and zinc, among others. Nigeria can be rightly described as being blessed beyond measure. But is it? In the midst of this vast wealth is a poverty index that shows the country as one of the poorest nations in the world. It is obvious that wealth from the ground has not been transformed into wealth on the ground, which is financial wealth and fiscal infrastructure. Former Managing Director of the World Bank and two-time Minister of Finance in Nigeria, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, once said, "Every natural resource blessing which is mismanaged becomes a curse." This may have been the case of Nigeria since the 1960s, with the mismanagement of God-given wealth by the people. Everyone seems to be guilty, as no Nigerian is absolved of this blame to properly manage the vast abundance of natural resource wealth in the country. No government or people chooses to impoverish themselves. The path may have been missed or probably not known at all. The question is, what led to this mismanagement? Where did government and the people get it all wrong? Where did they miss the path?
There's history and there's structure. Briefly, history, the Nigerian natural resources in terms of oil were concessioned to foreign companies, essentially. The first phase of our industry started in the pre-colonial times to, I would say, probably 1969, when the Petroleum Act was promulgated. And at that time, the assets were concessioned to foreign companies. The government just got royalties and taxes, presumably. The Petroleum Act tried to bring some structure, and soon after that, the government took an interest in some of these assets. And I think that structure, where government role was ambivalent in terms of just regulating the industry and making sure that environment was protected, making sure that it maximized its revenues to itself, made sure that the industry served the purpose of not just revenue for the government, but also provided employment and diversified.
Many researchers have highlighted the various challenges that abound in the management of natural resources in the country, and the broad perspectives to these challenges are, but not restricted to, environmental degradation, corruption, weak governance, the Dutch disease, price volatility, natural resource as depleting assets, climate change, and its attendant consequences.
The Nigerian Natural Resource Charter has been in existence for about 7 years now. We started in 2012. The NRC is the first of its kind across the world. The NRC implements the Natural Resource Charter which is a global initiative that is implemented across the world by the Natural Resource Governance Institute. But the NNRC itself is the first of its kind because it is an NGO that implements it in Nigeria. In other parts of the world, in Myanmar, in Kenya, and other resource-rich countries, implement it by either the states implementing it themselves, using it as a self-assessment, or the NRGI or other CSOs or NGOs implement it on their behalf. But the NNRC is unique in that it was domesticated with a group of experts, so drawn from the academia, drawn from the industry, drawn from civil society, and all these people come together to make sure that they checkmate what the government does in its management of Nigeria's natural resources.
Each of the expert panel members have their specialty and are divided into 3 main issue groups. These are upstream issues, social issues, and public finance issues. This expert panel is led by Nigeria's former 2-time Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of State for Petroleum, Odeyin Ajumogobia, who also serves as the chair of this institute.
And what the NNRC Charter basically has defined 12 precepts. The first is to improve the economic and social well-being of the country using the natural resource as a base. And that's basically a summary of the other 12 precepts, which talk about accountability, transparency, the national oil company and how it's run, how investors, the rules of engagement in the industry, and so on. And basically it's to set out benchmarks against which government can review itself in terms of how are we doing. And what we've done is we have basically a traffic light benchmarking thing of red, amber and green. Sadly, since this process started in 2012, it's largely been red and amber, very, very little green.
Other expert panel members are Professor Asisi Asobie, Dr. Otive Igbuzo, Mr. Ademola Adeyemi Beru, Mr. Austin Olorinshola, Ms. Ronke Onadeko, Mr. Sam Daibo, Mr. Tunji Ladna, Mrs. Lois Machunga, Professor Adeola Adenikiju, Professor Akpan Ekpo, Professor Ukoha Ukiwu, Dr. Mrs. Obiageli Ezekwesili, and Professor Ode Ojewu. There are 12 precepts that have been identified by the Charter, which cover the main decisions required to transform assets under the ground into the development above the ground. In 2012, the NNRC pioneered the assessment framework of the petroleum sector using these principles. The traffic light rating system was adopted. The traffic light scoring system is a system for indicating the status of a variable using the red, amber, or green of traffic lights. Red indicates danger, amber shows there is some progress, while green is a safe zone. The NNRC has published 3 benchmarking exercise reports, otherwise known as the BERs. One in 2012, another in 2014, while the most recent is in 2017. This exercise report shows findings from evaluations of the Nigerian government's performance in the extractive sector using the 12 precepts. The precepts are: Precept 1, Strategy, Legal Framework, and Institutions. Resource management should secure the greatest benefit for citizens through an inclusive and comprehensive national strategy, clear legal framework, and competent institutions. Precept 2, Transparency and Accountability. Resource governance requires decision makers to be accountable to an informed public. Precept 3, Exploration, licensing, and monitoring operations. The government should encourage efficient exploration and production operations and allocate rights transparently. Precept 4, Taxation and other company payments. Tax regimes and contractual terms should enable the government to realize the full value of its resources consistent with attracting necessary investment and should be robust to changing circumstances. Precept 5. Local impacts. The government should pursue opportunities for local benefits and account for, mitigate and offset the environmental and social costs of resource extraction projects. Precept 6. State-owned enterprises. National-owned companies should be accountable with well-defined mandates and an objective of commercial efficiency. Precept 7. Investing for growth. The government should invest revenues to achieve optimal and equitable outcomes for current and future generations. Precept 8. Stabilizing expenditure. The government should smoothen domestic spending of revenues to account for revenue volatility. Precept 9. Public spending. The government should use revenues as an opportunity to increase the efficiency of public spending at the national and subnational levels. Precept 10. Private sector development. The government should facilitate private sector investments to diversify the economy and to engage in the extractive sector. Precept 11. Role of extractive industries. Companies should commit to the highest environmental, social, and human rights standards and to sustainable development. Precept 12. Role of international communities. Governments and international organizations should promote an upward harmonization of standards to support sustainable development. The 2012 and 2014 benchmarking exercise report revealed 9 reds and 3 ambers. These reds are in precepts 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 11, and 12, while 3, 8, and 10 had ambers. The latest of these assessment reports is the 2017 benchmarking exercise report. This report analyzes the governance of the petroleum wealth in Nigeria and identifies crucial changes that have taken place in the sector since the last benchmarking exercise in 2014. The partners in this research carried out on the petroleum sector was done by the following bodies: Center for Public Policy Alternatives, CPPA, Civil Society Legislative and Advocacy Center, CISLAC, the Center for the Studies of the Economy of Africa, CSEA, the Center for Social Justice, CSJ, Social Action, SA. Here is a summary of the precepts as encapsulated in the 2017 benchmarking exercise report. The 2017 benchmarking exercise report shows 10 ambers and 2 reds in precepts 5 and 6. As the NNRC prepares for another review in 2019, it is hoped that there will be significant progress in all the 12 precepts that will earn the country its pride of place among oil and gas producing nations.